a movie sure isn't easy. Get it right and it can provide a crowd-pleasing cherry on top of a great story. But get it wrong and you can end up throwing away so much of the audience's goodwill that you've earned. As such, it's little surprise that climaxes and third acts tend to be the most workshopped and revised aspect of just about any film, with filmmakers going back and forth over how things should wrap up in order to send viewers home happy. With that in mind, I'm Ellie with What Culture, and here are 10 alternate endings to 2021 movies you almost saw. Number 10. Wenwu survives Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings climaxes with Shang-Chi's father Wenwu being manipulated by the Dweller in Darkness into opening the dark gate that contains it, unleashing it upon the village of Ta Lo. Shang-Chi ultimately ends up battling and defeating Wenwu, but decides to spare him. Yet, in a tragic twist, Wenwu is killed when the Dweller in Darkness consumes his soul, while he sacrifices himself to protect his son. But director and co-writer Destin Daniel Cretton confirmed shortly after the film's release that an earlier version of the script actually had Wenwu survive the final battle. And while he didn't elaborate further on the implications of Wenwu being alive, it clearly would have created a totally different dynamic for the film's ending. As for why Wenwu was killed, Cretton said that it felt like a cheat for the character to survive in their original version. Some things work and some things don't. Number 9. Guy ends up with MILLIE, Free Guy. Free Guy's conclusion sees the digital inhabitants of Free City, including NPC Guy, being saved, while nefarious CEO Antoine is arrested for his criminal wrongdoing. Guy then reveals to MILLIE that his code is a secret love letter to MILLIE from her real-world love interest Keys, prompting MILLIE to leave the game and kiss Keys. It's a cute ending and absolutely the right one for the film, but originally Free Guy wrapped up with a somewhat weirder and less plausible love-in. Writer Matt Lieberman confirmed that the first version of the script had MILLIE hooking up with Guy himself, not Keys. In the original script, Guy ends up with MILLIE. They maintain their relationship into whatever the sequel will be, but Ryan and director Sean Levy felt that it needed that ghost moment. Nobody could really rationalize a person having an extended stay as bit and bytes. He's absolutely right. Having MILLIE spend most of her time in Free City embarking on a digital romance with Guy would have been awkward to say the least. It was a good change. Number 8. Bond gets blown up in a rocket or gets shot. No Time to Die boasts perhaps the single ballsiest ending of any movie of the past year, as the iconic spy franchise finally did the unthinkable and killed off James Bond. After villain Safin infects 007 with nanobots which will prevent him from ever being able to touch Madeleine or his daughter Mathilde, Bond kills Safin and decides he'd rather die than go on without having his family in his life. And so, Bond makes no effort to escape the impending missile, which destroys Safin's nanobot factory while also obliterating him. It's a brutal ending, but an extremely satisfying and affecting one. After the dust following its release cleared, director and co-writer Cary Joji Fukunaga confirmed that the decision to kill Bond was made early on in the development process, though it was a good while later before they finally settled on the precise method of his death. In an interview with Variety, Fukunaga mentioned 2 alternate death scenarios for Bond, namely exploding in a rocket and being shot out of nowhere. Of the latter, he explained, "A bullet, like an anonymous bullet, I remember that one, but it just seemed like a conventional weapons death didn't seem appropriate, given how much he had been able to escape from everything else. The fact that it would just be a bullet that always had your name on it from the beginning, as a sort of thematic element seemed, while realistic, for Bond it had to be something even beyond that, like the impossible situation. It's tough to argue with the logic here. A lot of fans would have been extremely disappointed by Bond simply being shot to death, compared to the more heightened and extreme nature of his demise in the final film. Number 7. The Mitchells battle MECHAPAL, The Mitchells vs. the Machines. The Mitchells vs. the Machines climax sees the titular family breaking into PAL Labs HQ to shut the malevolent AI PAL down. PAL is eventually destroyed in hilarious fashion by being dropped in a glass of water, freeing all the captured humans and disabling PAL's robot army. The original ending was far more over the top top, with Pal gathering all the electronic appliances in the vicinity to become a gigantic MECHAPAL, complete with a Furby for a head. Pal is still stopped by being dropped into a glass of water, but has an added final form as a huge Transformer-esque robot. It isn't known why the ending was changed, but as confirmed by the film's head of story Guillermo Martinez, it got far along enough in the process to be rendered into an animatic. Either ending probably would have worked pretty well. Number 6. The Eternals' memories get wiped. Eternals. Eternals ends with the titular superheroes forming the Unimind and preventing the gestating celestial Tiamat from emerging from the Earth's core, in turn saving the planet from destruction. The surviving Eternals then split themselves between Earth and their spaceship the Domo to seek out other Eternals before the celestial Arishem emerges and kidnaps Cersei, Kingo and Phastos, pulling them into space. He expresses frustration that they prevented Tiamat's birth, but considers sparing humanity if their memories demonstrate Earth worthy of being saved. For all the film's flaws, it's an interesting ending that teases future adventures, though Chloe Zhao's original ending was decidedly bleaker. It used to end with everybody back on the ship, minds erased and just going on to another planet, like Twilight Zone. I didn't hate it, because I'm used to films that are more melancholy, but I don't think it went down well with audiences. I remember when it goes to black, everyone was like, I don't know what to do. It's the MCU and you want to be excited for what's next. From Zhao's words, it sounds like this ending was actually shot and test screened, but given that it would have effectively wiped the slate clean by erasing the Eternals' memories of their pivotal adventure, it risked making the entire movie feel like a bit of a non-event. Number 5. Tony struts down the street, the Many Saints of Newark. The Many Saints of Newark delivered an unnecessary yet entertaining prologue to hit TV show The Sopranos, presenting the formative circumstances which led Tony Soprano into a life of crime. The film ends with the assassination of Tony's mentor, Dicky Moltisanti, the implication being that this was a pivotal event in his life and one which steered him towards an adulthood defined by law-breaking and ultra-violence. As Tony stares into Dicky's casket, the iconic Sopranos theme plays and we cut to the credits. Yet, Sopranos creator David Chase originally wrote a more cutesy ending for the film, which he ultimately decided against, feeling that it wasn't in step with the tone of the movie up to that point. In the alternate ending, the theme music from the show plays as young Tony struts down the street in a very I'm going to be the boss gangster of the world kind of way, and I didn't buy it, and even though I wrote it, it was my idea. I had to relieve everyone else of the stupidity of it. I thought, Tony's not getting into some effing cool gang, he's going to become a killer, a criminal, an unhappy man. It was definitely the right call. Number 4. Alberto becomes a giant kraken, LUCA. LUCA is a refreshingly low-key, small-scale effort by Pixar, and its climax is fittingly designed within the same vein, unfolding amid the final leg of the Porto Rosso Cup, a race involving swimming, pasta eating and cycling. The ending boils down to the town of Porto Rosso learning to embrace sea monster LUCA and his similarly afflicted family, and that's that. But the original climax was decidedly more bombastic and typical of what audiences have been reared to expect from big-budget studio animation, with LUCA's best pal Alberto turning into a kraken who LUCA then attempts to protect. Director Enrico Casarosa said of the change, "We had a big ending with a kraken, Alberto turning into a kraken magically, and LUCA was going to protect him and defend him. And we realised that we want to tell a smaller kid-like movie world here. So the monster movie ending, which was very much about the two factions, very much about two worlds against each other, that might work with Romeo and Juliet version of the story, but it didn't really work for the one that we more and more fell in love with. It's tough to argue with the logic here. This was a more reined-in story that didn't need to go big in the final stretch, as interesting as it would have been to see Alberto as a huge kraken." Number 3. Ratcatcher 2 dies, The Suicide Squad. James Gunn's The Suicide Squad was an extremely smooth production by all accounts, enough that it was a rare blockbuster to have no reshoots whatsoever. During the scripting process, Gunn did almost arrive at an altogether different, darker ending, which would have resulted in breakout character Ratcatcher 2 being suddenly killed off in Act 3. Gunn said, At the very end of the movie, Ratcatcher 2 had smuggled in and gotten away with all of that information from Jotunheim, and the rest of the group didn't know about it, and Waller blew up her head after they went back to the prison, at which point Harley tries to talk Bloodsport, Bloodsport's freaking out because he's connected to this person like a daughter, and he's freaking out, and Harley is actually being sort of kind, in a weird way, trying to talk Bloodsport into just letting it go. Bloodsport ends up shooting Waller in the heart with a combustible bullet, and threatening to blow her up. It was sort of complicated, but it was something like that. He didn't shoot her in the heart, he shot her right below the heart with one of the exploding bullets, which we see Peacemaker using earlier in the movie, and so now she has to do what he says. It didn't really tell the story that I wanted to tell, which is much more about the characters' different journeys emotionally, and for me, really, the ending with Bloodsport petting the rat, that, to me, was the perfect ending for the movie. Gunn was absolutely on the money here. It would have been a massive bummer for such a surprising fan-favourite character to get brutally killed off like that, especially after the violent demise of another favourite, Polka Dot Man, late in the film. Number 2. Jeff and Goodyear find humans. Finch. If you were paying attention to the production of the Tom Hanks starring post-apocalyptic sci-fi drama Finch, you might have been expecting to see a larger ensemble cast, namely Samira Wiley, Skeet Ulrich and Laura Harrier, who were counted among the film's cast right up until its release. That's because the three were supposed to appear as benevolent humans who meet robot Jeff and dog Goodyear following the death of their human companion Finch at the end of the story. But director Miguel Sapochnik made the painful decision to cut this epilogue in order to focus the emotional core of the story on Finch's demise from an unspecified illness, implied to be radiation sickness, before Jeff and Goodyear discover evidence of human survivors and set off in pursuit of them. Sapochnik said, "There is a whole section that ended up on the cutting room floor that was about Jeff finally coming into contact with human beings and how they were not what he expected and certainly not what his father Finch had prepared him for. But when we got to post, we were in the edit, there was a point where I realised that I knew we had reached the end of the movie, but we still had more story to tell. I tried as much as I could to see if we could accommodate it, but it was a bigger story than we had time to tell in the time we had left to tell it. The final ending certainly doesn't feel incomplete, or as if anything vital was cleaved away, so he may have made the right call, but we can't know for sure without seeing the footage." Number 1. The Dragons Don't Return, Raya and the Last Dragon. Raya and the Last Dragon ends with the evil spirits known as the Druin being vanquished and all the petrified dragons as well as the recently dead Sisu being brought back to life. A happy ending for all then. But it almost didn't go this way, as co-director Don Hall explained that they originally debated having all the other dragons remain petrified and Sisu survive as the truly last dragon. The feeling was that bringing all the stone dragons back could undermine the movie's message about human unity being needed to solve human problems. Yet, producer Osnat Shura ultimately fought for a more triumphant and uplifting ending to make the audience's heart sing. Shura said, "What we were digging into psychologically is if we are the solution, why are we bringing the magical, mystical creatures back in? The place where we arrived is a place that's more connected to a more Southeast Asia and Southeast Asian perspective, which is when we found the solution for ourselves that we earned the right to manifest the mystical." That original ending certainly would have been intriguingly melancholic, but it's easy to see why the filmmakers opted for this more conventionally crowd-pleasing one instead. And there you have it. If you can think of any other alternate endings to 2021 movies, then we'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And while you're there, like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. You can also head over to Twitter to follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.